Hey, how you doing? Justin here. Today we're going to chat about songwriting, or more specifically, how you might get into co-writing. That is writing a song with somebody else. I've been writing songs most of my life. I've written a few hundred songs. A handful of them might even be decent, but the ones that I've enjoyed writing the most have been the co-writes. So in this video, I'd like to talk a bit about the process of doing that, inspire you to have a go at doing it, and give you a kind of a framework that you might use to start to get going with it. There are no real rules for writing songs, either when you're writing on your own or if you're doing a co-write. Everybody's a little different with different strengths and weaknesses, and that's cool. In fact, that's great. Songwriting celebrates individuality, so don't feel that your songwriting partnership should be restricted in any way. For me personally, I find the major benefit of doing a co-write is being able to decide if something is good or not more quickly. If I'm writing on my own, I'll go, oh, is it this or should it be that or is it that way? Whereas if I'm writing with someone else, I go, oh, what do you think about this? And I go, nah, or yeah, that's great. So you get kind of instant feedback. So it's actually a quite a lot faster process for me when I'm co-writing. Sometimes people are a little afraid of getting into songwriting and bearing their soul to somebody else, but it's worth remembering that a lot of the greatest songs of all time have come out of songwriting partnerships. Obviously, Lennon-McCartney is an obvious one from the Beatles. You've got Jagger Richards from the Rolling Stones. You've got Benny and Bjorn from ABBA. You've got Page and Plant from Led Zeppelin. There are loads of examples of people who write songs together, and I'm sure that this sounding board idea is an important part, but sometimes you're playing off of somebody's strength and somebody's weakness. Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Elton only writes the music, Bernie only writes the words. There's a real thing going on now, especially in pop music, for top-line writers. So one person or a group of people will do the production, write the whole track, all of the music, all of the drums and the guitar and the bass and the synths and the hooks and all of that sort of stuff is done by one person or one team. And then they have a top-line writer. One of the best around is a friend of mine, Kathy Dennis. I've had the pleasure of writing with her a number of times. And she's an expert top-line writer, and working with her has been fantastic to see the way in a co-writing situation would be mostly my job is coming up with chords and her job is finding a melody and finding the lyrics. So you're dividing your skill set between your different strengths. I love writing lyrics, but in a co-writing situation, often I'll be doing the kind of the music part while somebody else is doing the lyrics. That's definitely a thing that happens in my band, We Came as Strangers. I tend to be much more involved with the music thing, and the singer, Lily, tends to be the one who does most of the lyric writing and coming up with the melodies, although we all have a hand in it as well. So there are many different approaches to this. Don't feel like it should be a set thing, but of course the first thing you've got to do is find somebody to write a song with. Of course, there are many different ways of finding somebody to write with. Personally, I've always preferred being in a room with somebody. So trying to look for somebody that you can meet up with locally, I think, is a really good idea. I have written a number of songs online, with a video link. And it kind of works, but I just find that capturing the vibe is much more difficult there. Like reading the vibe of the other person it's much easier when you're in the room with somebody. So I would recommend that first of all, but also remember that we got the JustinGuitarCommunity.com, where there's a whole community of guitar players. Many of them are into songwriting. There's loads of collaborations going on there already. So if you haven't headed over to the community before, you might want to go and check that out and see if you can find somebody to write with virtually, or you might even find somebody that's in your area. Before I actually start writing with anyone in the studio, I'll nearly always try and meet up for a coffee or a beer somewhere beforehand. Just to have a chat about what our favourite bands are, the vibes on writing, and to suss them out as a person. When you're co-writing, a lot of it's about the energy, the chemistry between you and the other writer. You want to find somebody who's supportive and kind and is into into the same sort of stuff. You should think about that as well for yourself, that you want to be supportive of that person. You want to be encouraging. Don't try not to be too negative. Nobody wants to work with an asshole. If you're not nice or you're too like, I hate this and I don't like that and this is no good and these people suck and this person ripped me off and blah, blah. It's just this kind of negative vibe isn't going to make for a very cool song in my humble opinion. One thing that a lot of people worry about when they first get into co-writing is a split. They really worry that they're going to do all the work and the other person's going to get a share of their song. When you write a song with somebody, you get a 50-50 share, or like it's divided evenly between the people in the room. Some days you might feel like you've done most of the work and other people did more coffee making, and other days that you'll be the one that's doing all the encouraging and less part of the writing. It all kind of evens itself out. So when you're doing a right thing, that's the deal. If there's two of you, it's 50-50. If there's three, it's 33 and a third each. That's just I don't think it should get more complicated than that. There's definitely a great deal of benefit to working with songwriters that are more experienced than yourself. I definitely find working with full-time writers a real pleasure. Just their ability to separate the wheat from the chaff and make decisions about stuff, understanding how form, and just the general experience of having written a lot of songs is super beneficial. So if you can find somebody more experienced that would like to write a tune with you, definitely grab at that opportunity. Do remember, one of the great benefits of writing together is the sharing of responsibilities. So don't feel like you have to be involved with every bit. And that's another one of those reasons why you should meet up with a writer before you start. It doesn't really work if you're both great into lyrics and not really good with music. So really you want to find somebody who complements your skill set. If you're really good at writing lyrics, if that's your thing, then you want to find somebody who's more into the music thing. If you don't sing, you want to maybe find somebody who can sing a bit, at least to be able to sing a demo. So don't feel like you have to be really good at doing everything, and try and find a writer that will complement your skill set. So once you've found somebody to actually write with, how do you get started? It's a really good question. Now, there's lots of different approaches. The way I do it is I collect seeds, and seeds are the things that I can grow songs from. Might be a lyric idea, might be a chord progression, it might be a chord, a vibe, anything at all that I feel is an idea strong enough to grow a song from. They are, in my case, mostly kind of guitar or musical ideas. I record them into my phone and I label them up so I've got them, and when I'm approaching a songwriting session, I'll go through, find a few that I think might be appropriate for that particular session. I'll relearn them, kind of get them fresh, so that when I sit down with someone, I go, hey, I don't know, I've got this idea. Should we try this? I'll play that. Oh, well, what about this idea? Oh, you don't like that? Well, what have you got? And then see. And the idea is that you're just going to throw around a few ideas until you find something that you both set like is like, yeah, okay, this is a good vibe. Let's start here. The aim definitely when you begin shouldn't be to write an amazing song. The same as when you first learn guitar, you can't expect to be playing incredible guitar in the first day. It's no different with songwriting. Don't expect suddenly that you're going to be writing a massive hit on your first go. It's much more likely you're going to write a pretty crappy song the first time. That's fine. Don't worry about it. It's experience. It's really important that you get that. Because a lot of people sit down and they write songs and they're expecting to be an amazing songwriter straight away, like it's a gift. I don't think it is. I think it's a craft, and crafts take effort and work and consideration and study, just like everything else in music, I feel like. There are times where songs seem to be given to us, some divine thing just comes and presents us with a song, but I feel like that's a pretty rare thing. Most times, most people are having to craft it. So once you've thrashed around a few ideas and settled on a seed, it's time to think about how to grow it and to start experimenting with it. There's one little tip I want to give you before we get more into doing that, and that is to record everything. Every songwriting session I do, I grab my phone, I use the voice recorder, I hit record, I leave the phone on the table or leave it somewhere nearby. The amount of times I've been writing and played some chords and sung a melody, it's been like amazing. And someone's going, yeah, that one, let's start with that. And you go like, oh, I can't remember it. You know, or a chord progression or a lick or whatever, or a word or a phrase. You don't want to lose it because you never know when inspiration's going to strike. So the idea of recording everything is really strong. Actually, to be honest, usually what I do, especially if I'm co-writing, is that we both record everything, and one of them just runs for the whole thing, and the other one is the one that we would stop and rewind a bit if we wanted to check out something and record, like when we go like, oh, we've got a verse and a chorus, let's record that as a where we're at now, then we'd record it into that other phone. So the second phone would be more snippets based and the other one would be the whole thing. But maybe that's getting a little bit too fussy on that sort of thing. So how do you start? You've got a seed, you've got an idea. Maybe it's a chord progression. Chord progressions are a really common place to start. So remember, if you're just completely new to writing, start with diatonic chords in the key. It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't be going to make things really hard at the beginning. Keep it simple. So you're in the key of G, you've got G, C, D, A minor, E minor, and B minor. Write a song with it. Experiment with the chords. Find a chord progression that's interesting. If you're really lost, studying songs that you love is a great idea. Listening to the chord progressions. One little trick that I used to do when I was learning to write songs, well, I'm still learning to write songs, but when I first started writing songs, was I would borrow a chord progression from a song that I liked, and I'd start with that and then write my own melody over the top. Very often times I'd end up changing the chord progression anyway, but it was a solid starting point. Because again, all you're looking for at the beginning stages is a starting point. So you got a chord progression, then you find a melody, you just mess around, literally. that's the starting point I've got. I'm just making it up with a simple, very common chord progression. But right now it's still not a song, 'cause it's different every time, and that doesn't make sense. There has to be some sort of continuity, otherwise it's not really gonna work. So what I was just doing there is an example of it not working. There needs to be a consistency, particularly in a verse. Things can get pretty complicated later on, but again, keep it simple when you start. So the thing that when I very first started that idea, and now I can't remember it, but la ba da 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 da. Let's say it's that. La ba da 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 ba da da da. Maybe it's different the third time. La da 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 ba ba ba. La ba da 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 da. I'm just, you get the idea. I'm experimenting with the chords and I'm just mucking around with the melody, a loos and a laves, seeing what I can find that's going to be consistent. And the consistency in the verses is a key thing a lot of songwriters miss when they start. The verses need to be the same, more or less. The same melody, the same kind of scan, the same amount of syllables of the words, generally. It doesn't always have to be exactly the same. I'm just trying to give you these guidelines. They're only guidelines, break them as much as you like. But it's a good starting point. Now, once you've got it, remember that your verses are going to be the same. So verse 1 and verse 2 and verse 3 and verse 4, if you got one, are going to have the same melody but with different words. Verses are where you're telling your story. Okay, I always think it can be helpful to think of like the verses is where you're telling the story, and the chorus is where the listener relates their own stories back to your experience. So the verses generally tend to be quite specific, and the choruses tend to be quite general. The chorus should be the same every time. The verses is a different part of the story with each verse. So one of the first things you want to do is settle on a melody for the verse, and you're working on it together. And this is really good because one person will be playing the chords, and you can both be kind of humming ideas, and then when you get one you hum it to the other person and go la ba ba da ba 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 da da ba ba da. You go, is that all right? Ba ba da ba 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 da ba ba da ba ba. The other person might go, or maybe it's too busy, you go ba ba da ba 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 da da ba. And you kind of bounce it around between you to find one that you're happy with. If you settle on and go, okay, it's going to be that one. Once you've got it, then you maybe start thinking about your lyric. You have, I was an elephant again today. I don't know where that came from. Everyone's happy in the crowd today. So that would be my phrase. And in the second verse, it should be more or less the same. My carpet is dirty, need to hoover today. Paper on the floor, I need to clean away. You get the idea. Once you've got that scan of the verse, it wants to be the same each time. Now, I'm just doing the first part of the verse because I think I was doing like the same melody, something different, and then back to the same one. Pretty common kind of a form in a verse. It doesn't really matter. There's lots of different song forms. You don't need to stick to one in particular, but just make sure your verses are the same. So I would recommend that you have a verse and then you have a second verse, and then you've got to find a chorus. Now, a lot of people struggle with the chorus sometimes, and it happens many different ways. There isn't one way that anybody writes a song ever, I don't think. But one of the common approaches is to play a verse and another verse and then kind of run into the chorus to see where it goes. So if you've gone, just doing the last part of the verse, does it go to here and then I don't know, or does it go da 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 ba ba da da ba ba da da ba ba da da da. I No. But this idea of running up into it and then trying to go somewhere. Just let your creativity kind of flow into an idea. Try a new chord, try a new feel. Remember that the chorus wants to be bigger than the verses generally. So the verses is telling the stories, then it comes to the chorus, you're like, yeah, come on, let's get it, not always. Obviously, not if you're doing a ballad, it doesn't want to suddenly get all poppy in the middle of it. But you're getting the vibe here. I'm trying to give you a general outline. The chorus is going to be probably bigger than the verses, and it wants to be different to the verses. So try doing verse, and then run into the chorus. Both try. You and the other writer. Get some feedback from each other. Where's it going? What about this chord? Should we try that? Suggest to the other person, hey, what if we try this chord or that chord or this rhythm? Feedback from each other. Bounce the ideas around. Now, once you've got a verse and a chorus, you're ready to start thinking about the form. Now, again, there are many different song forms that work. You want to experiment with different ones, but a starting point, again, if we're talking about just doing this for the first time, you want to start with probably the most standard form of song that there is, which would be verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. So if you've done your first two verses and you've got a chorus, then you just need one more verse, which will have the same chords and the same melody as the verses, so just different words. Then it'll go back to the chorus, which will be exactly the same as the one that you've decided on. Then you have a bridge. Now, a bridge is usually very different to everything else that's come before. Okay, it's like a palate cleanser when you go to a fancy restaurant and in between courses they bring you out like a little lemon sorbet to cleanse your palate. That's a little bit what happens with the bridge, because you've got the chorus is the part that you want people to remember. So you've got story, chorus, but you want to give them many more choruses if you can, so they remember it better. So you drop a bridge, the palate cleanser, and then because you've done that, you can bash them with two more choruses at the end. So you end up with 4 choruses, 2 concurrently at the end. So it's going to earworm as best as you can. Okay, I'm massively oversimplifying this stuff, but I'm hoping that you'll get the point. So the bridge is normally quite short, often 8 bars long. It's often called a middle 8 as well, sometimes the bridge. There are other song forms that happen like pre-choruses and solos, but again, I would recommend when you're starting to just really try to keep it as simple as possible. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, done. And once you've got that, once you've got through to the end of the song, congratulations, you've written a song. That doesn't mean that you've finished it. You've written a song, and that's a really good starting point. You might go back and tweak the lyrics a little bit. Very often when I'm writing songs with someone, we write a verse, maybe a couple of verses and a chorus, and then we leave it for a bit. And the lyric writer will go away and think a bit more about the lyrics. Oftentimes we'll try and get it all done together, but most commonly the lyrics are the thing that take the longest to try and knuckle down on. So very often, like in my band, we'll be all writing together. We'll get a bit of a vibe on. Once we start the production, Lily, the lyricist and singer, she'll go off and work more on the lyrics while the rest of us work on the production. And then she'll either bounce her ideas around with us or not. So very often she's an amazing lyric writer. So very, very often she just does it on her own. But we try and get involved, and we're definitely available if she wants some help with anything. So that's quite a common thing. So don't feel like you have to do everything all at once. But if you can, it's also a good vibe to actually get through it and finish the song together in a session is amazing. I've mentioned this a couple of times already in this video, but I'm going to mention it again because it's really important. It's probably the biggest mistake that people make when they get into writing, and that is they expect too much when they first start. Don't be thinking that the first song you write is going to be some massive hit. Maybe that's happened in history, I don't know, but I think it's pretty unlikely. Much more common is for people to write pretty bad songs, usually far too long. I don't know why that happens, but very often, I used to teach songwriting quite a lot, and people would bring in their songs for a kind of critique and review and talk about production and how it works. And so many times people would bring in these 6, 8, 10-minute songs. And we're like, dude, like, what are you doing? This is your second song and it's that long. Like, it's boring. Like, we need to really cut back on that. So be really aware of long songs. There are people that write great long songs, but they're in the minority. If people are going to write a really long song, they need to be really, really good and captivating and interesting for that whole time. If you're new to songs, it's going to be quite a challenge to do that. So keep it short, keep it simple, and just be happy to have written a song. To have done a tune and go like, yeah, I've written a song. This is cool. If you want to get into writing, like recording and production, that's a whole other game. Super fun. I really recommend it, especially these days. It's so simple to get into with like products like GarageBand, where you can program drums and bass really simply, record your guitar, record your voice, add effects, and end up with a pretty decent sounding recording pretty quickly. Definitely encourage you to do that. It's loads and loads of great fun. But particularly with writing, just don't expect too much. Be happy to have written a song and expect to write a good dozen songs before you get anywhere that would be kind of a nice song, a good song. You're going to write songs where you rhyme eyes and disguise and stuff like that, things that are just like, oh God. You're going to find those things that you're going to find patterns of things that you do that you know aren't great. Particularly if you're writing with somebody, and if they've got a bit more experience than you, you'll soon see when you present certain ideas and they get wiped off the table pretty quick that you're like, yeah, maybe these things aren't that good. Maybe they are and they don't know what they're talking about. Who knows? And songwriting is a really deeply personal thing. I often felt really funny when somebody would bring a song in that they'd written, particularly if it was something about, something very personal about a relationship breakup or loss of somebody in their life. It's almost like they're calling their kid ugly. That's always the phrase I used to use. So if you ever ask me or ask somebody for critique of your song, if they're going to be honest with you, you have to take it. Okay, it can be really tough to hear, like, dude, those lyrics are really bad. Like the rhymes are horrible and it's really cheesy. You need to fix that. That if somebody says that to you, it's going to hurt. But hopefully they're doing it with good intentions and they're trying to help you make a better song. I've definitely had those kind of critiques in my life, and it didn't feel nice when somebody doesn't like your song. Also just while I'm on it, be careful about playing your song to people that aren't interested. There's many occasions where I know people that have written a song and made a demo and they want to play it to everyone, but a lot of people aren't going to be interested, and it can be a bit weird if somebody's playing you their song and they really don't like it. It can be really, really awkward, and you sit there going like, God, this is absolute crap, man. Oh Jesus, oh God, he sings out of tune too. Oh God. It's just really embarrassing. So don't do that. Make sure that people actually want to hear your demo before you play it to them. And if you can, try and seek the advice of industry professionals, if you know any, or teachers that are going to give you honest feedback and let you know about how you're going with your writing. Man, this has been a whole lot of talking and not a lot of playing, but I hope at the end of this that I've inspired you to try and find somebody and write a song with them. I swear it's one of the most amazing experiences that you can have in music. Playing guitar is great, but great guitar isn't much good without a great song to put it in. I learned that when I was in my late teens, and it stayed with me my whole life. Writing songs is an important part of the deal if you want to take your musicianship to that next kind of place, I think. Anyway, not everybody wants to write songs. I feel like that's maybe taken a little bit too far. But it's not. That's actually how I feel. I think that learning to write songs is important because it teaches you about arranging and writing and all of that sort of stuff. And if you've followed through the video this far already, you're probably interested. So excuse me waffling on. But that's kind of the point, is expressing yourself. If you learn to express yourself through a song, it makes a song that you've written, it makes you a better guitar player because it helps you understand the song form, the songwriting process, and what you would bring to somebody else's song if you just want to play guitar. So yeah, I do think songwriting is an important part of the journey for anyone, even if you didn't want to be a full-time songwriter or write pop hits or whatever. I hope this has been helpful. If you haven't heard any of my songs before, you might want to go and look up my band. It's called We Came as Strangers. You'll find us on all major streaming services. Go and have a listen and be your own judge as to whether you want to take my songwriting advice or not. Hope you have a fantastic day and a great songwriting session. I'll see you for more very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.